My name is Durgam Vahia. I'm a product manager at LinkedIn, and at LinkedIn for about 18 months now. And like Lauren mentioned, I was running my own startup, which was trying to do more kind of predictive search in more of enterprise settings. Um, uh, Learned a lot of stuff. Company didn't progress as fast as we would have liked, but lots of learning there. There was kind of introduction into data products in general. And it kind of forced me to go out of my engineering comfort zone and deal with sales. Because as a startup founder, you got to go sell. And that was kind of a segue into my role here at LinkedIn, where they needed somebody who understands not just the technology and the product, but also can talk to sales and really understand who these people are and build the right stuff for them. So that's briefly my background. From talk perspective, I'll spend literally kind of 30 seconds on the organizational part, what organization I'm part of at LinkedIn. And people here have worked in sales, or quick show of hands, work with sales organizations, worked on products around sales, or okay, few. So I'll spend maybe kind of 5 minutes or so just to set up the primer. And not so much in terms of what sales is, I think we sort of know what it is, but what are the opportunities? What are the key challenges? And that will kind of motivate the rest of the talk here. And then we'll jump right into the product perspective. If you wanted to build an intelligent product based on data that serves this set of users, how would you go about that journey? So we'll spend majority of the time on that. So let's get going. Briefly about the organization that I'm part of. It's a data product organizations, and our job is to bring data to life. And we work at a number of layers. At the bottommost layer, we are responsible for the standardization and knowledge graph. And this is critical to every asset that LinkedIn builds. Right? So a very simple example would be software engineer, developer, 3 different ways or 10 different ways of specifying exact same job. How does LinkedIn figure out that this is the same thing and make sure they use it in the product? So that's some of the standardization stuff we do. There is also a whole bunch of effort in terms of reporting, search and discovery of matrix, standardization of matrix, targeting, ramping, experimentation, A/B testing, and so on. Roughly, it kind of falls into 2 big buckets. Initially, we try to go after our internal employees, and internal employees could be developers, or in my case, it's sales organization. But we try to push the envelope and see if our members, LinkedIn members and customers, can benefit from some of this as well. So that's roughly the area we are looking at. Very smart set of people. We are always hiring. So if you're looking for opportunities, happy to talk. With that preamble, let's jump into sales. So very briefly, so what is sales? At the end of the day, it's a funnel. There is a top end of the funnel and the bottom end of the funnel. The top end of the funnel is where you as a sales rep, beginning of the quarter or the beginning of the financial year, you would get assigned a whole bunch of accounts. Let's pick a number, 500 accounts. And you have to, at the end of your period of, let's say a quarter, you have to deliver a certain amount of revenue to the company. And that's called quota, right? And each of these, we call leads, are completely unqualified at that point. People may have come to your website, maybe just out of curiosity. Some people might have come to your website because they have a specific problem and they're looking for solutions. Or some of them might have real-time urgency that, hey, I know I have a problem, I need to solve it, and I have a budget to solve it now. So on that spectrum, you can kind of look at it as the top end of the funnel is the blue dots, which is lots of unqualified opportunities that might turn into business. Somewhere in between is yellow. That, yeah, I think that the problem is there is validation there. We are looking for solution, but not quite sure, is it this quarter or next quarter or maybe never. And finally, the red dots. These are your hot leads. These are your warm leads. And these are very likely are the customers who would translate into dollars. Right? So that's what the funnel looks like. And you, as a sales rep, your job is to convert as many blue dots into red dots as fast as you can. And it's not just a job for them, it's actually money, because they're all driven by quota. If you don't meet that quota, you don't get paid. And I'm slightly exaggerating here, but majority of their compensation relies on quota. So it's imperative that they convert these opportunities into dollars. That's the life of a salesperson, pretty hard life. like I said, I've gone through that myself and did a pretty horrible job at it. There lies the opportunity, right? So if you look at the industry benchmark numbers, they're abysmal. Right? So about 5 to 10% of these blue dots convert into red. Really, really small conversion rate, right? The deals take a really long time because, again, you are given 100 accounts, and now you have to build those relationships and get somebody to write a check. And that's not an easy job. And the numbers reflect that. And the side effect of that is really only 1/3 of the sales reps actually end up meeting that quota. And if you kind of take a 2-year or 3-year boundary, it's even a smaller number. So there is a lot of art there and very little science. And if we kind of now formalize this, what is this inefficiency? Right? So there lies the equations. It's one of the big metric, true north metric for sales, and it's called sales velocity, and it's essentially the same thing, number of leads. So you maximize the blue dots, the conversion rate, translate as many of blue dots into red, and finally the dollar per deal. And then over the period of time, which is the average length of the sales cycle. That's the metric we would like to optimize. And if you can optimize that, if you can do a better job compared to the status quo, you have an opportunity. And the question for us is, can a data product help here? That's the key opportunity that we are after. So now let's kind of walk through this product. How would this look like? How would you think through this? And like any product manager, they love the term journey. So I'm going to go through a journey, and it's a 3-step process. The first one is empathy, and now this is the favorite term of a designer. But you always start with the very basic principles. Who are the users? Who am I serving? What specific is the problem statement? Does it even worth solving? There are tons of problems out there. Is it a big enough problem that needs solving? And are we in the unique position to solve that problem versus somebody else could be solving that? So those are the basics. That's kind of a roughly product strategy. Once you've kind of figured that out and you've figured out the opportunity part of it, the second step is, can I build this product in a manner that users actually use it and benefit from it and get consistent value? That's the whole implementation, the operational part of the product. And then finally, and that's roughly in the kind of a startup term, it's a product market fit. You build something, you validated that with your early set of customers, you deliver the value, they started paying you some money for that, so you have some sort of product market fit. And the third step is the scale. Can I deliver this value in a consistent manner across large set of users in a reliable manner? So that's the scale part. So let's kind of break it down, go one step at a time. The empathy. So if we break down the sales funnel, and this is sort of more of an abstract breakdown. It's every company have their own little idiosyncrasies, the way they break it down. But in this case, let's take a very simple model where, hey, I have a bunch of accounts I have to go after. The first thing is, which one do I pick are most likely to buy? Right? This is a very simple propensity. Some companies are very likely to buy, and some are not. Can I make a list? Can I have a rank list? And that itself is actually a bunch of companies are trying to solve that exact problem. Once I've identified my key set of companies I'm going to go after, who do I connect with? And some of these companies are large. There are a lot of decision makers. They are spread across different organizations. Who are the right people that I should go after? That's another problem. Engage. Let's say I did reach out to somebody, and that happens to be the right person. What kind of content do I use to engage? Because I'm sure if you're on LinkedIn, you see lots of in-mails and a lot of emails coming from various people trying to sell you, right? You don't necessarily engage with those interactions, but the content is king. So you need to deliver the right content to be able to create that engagement, and so on. You acquire a customer, and finally, once you've got the customer, can they sell more, or can you sell more? That's the upsell. So that's sort of a funnel we are looking at. We'll not be able to solve all of it. We have to narrow down. We can't boil the ocean. So let's pick one specific problem, just the upsell. And the problem statement there is, I'm responsible for about 100 accounts. And out of this, some of them are likely to upsell. Some of them are not. Some of them may be attrition risk. and I may lose that revenue. Which ones do I pick? So the first question for us is, again, that's too broad. What is the specific problem statement? And we can break it down, an average relationship manager, and this is kind of putting ourselves in the shoe of the actual users of your product, right? And say, hey, I have identified two problems. First one is they deal with lots of different systems, a lot of silos, there are a lot of context switches, and that's efficiency loss. But then we say, hey, is it really a data product? Maybe somebody else can solve it. Maybe it's a workflow optimization product. Maybe it's not in our key area of expertise. So maybe you pass on that. Maybe another opportunity or problem statement is because of lack of creating a consistent story, you're not able to create meaningful narratives with your clients or customers, and as a result of that, you're leaving dollars on the table. That may be interesting. That is, maybe you can drive some interesting data insights for that specific problem and have some wins there. So let's zoom into that. First step, again, as a product manager, so you know who your users are. You sort of identify the opportunity. It's a meaningful opportunity. The next step is, do I have an hypothesis? Right? What can I do differently that others are not? What are my true first principles in terms of building this product? And you can kind of, it's pretty intuitive. You can think about, hey, my account is in a growing industry. Maybe they'll sell more too, because the whole industry is growing. You can look at, is that company itself is growing? If the company is growing, maybe they'll buy more licenses from you. The third thing is, if I look at the existing usage of my product, are they close to the ceiling? Are they 100% utilizing my licenses? Or do I have some slack? So you could use a lot of these different signals and create a hypothesis that, hey, if these things happen, then I do have an opportunity to upsell. So that's your first step. And then you further break it down into different types of data. Some of this data could be publicly available. So for example, whether the industry is growing. There are tons of industry research papers out there which you can rely on. Company websites, press releases. You could leverage some of those information. That itself is not enough most of the times. You have to look at your own product usage as well. So again, like I said, are people engaging? Are my users engaging? If it's a search product, are they searching? How well we are delivering the value with the existing footprint that we have with the company. So based on that, you could build a simple rule-based model, or you could use data science and build more kind of sophisticated machine learning model. But doesn't matter. As long as there is a hypothesis, there are certain things you believe in, and you build some sort of model on top of that, you have a ranking. Now you have a way to figure out of 100 accounts that I have, which one goes on top, which one goes below. And you can, it's not just, and model would give you maybe 0 to 1 score, but you can kind of also create a narrative around it, which is 1 is extremely likely, but may not be super interesting, and we'll get into some of those details. So hey, now you have a model, you got your UX guy or your UI engineers, and you built a simple UI on top of that. You have a product, you have an MVP. Now, and based on a very simple UI here is, hey, there are 3 accounts there. I got some information from publicly available sources like the information about IBM or Hewlett-Packard and so on. I superimpose my scores. And at this point, the idea is, hey, I give you this score, and Mr. Rep, you would be able to act on it, right? Great first product, great MVP, but then you hit the user. And this is typically what we see as we kind of evolve the product. So users would see, you would do your user research and put this in front of different reps, and they would say, hey, I kind of get it, right? I know what problem you are trying to solve. I can understand that this is a real problem. I get that. But I don't trust it. I have been selling for 20 years, and you are telling me some stupid score is going to tell me what I should do. Right? That's the first wall you hit into, and this is real. So you are fighting against the behaviors that are ingrained in the way people do their work, and you have to now change that behavior. And what's the right way to do that? So they would like to know what this score is. What does it mean for me? What actions I can take? So you now, and the net result of that is, if you're a product manager, you got a big bump. When you rolled out your product, you got a big bump. A lot of people are using it, and then down, because you're not delivering the key value in a right manner. So let's go solve. So the key to getting engagement is to be transparent. So it's not, and this is one of the key takeaways, it's not just enough to say, here is my score. My big sophisticated machine learning score gave me this specific number, and based on that we rank. You need to tell them, how does it relate to them? You need to speak the language of your users. In terms of the sales, you could say, hey, here is an opportunity. It's an upsell opportunity, or it's a relationship building opportunity, or there is new dollars on the table. Whatever that is, but it has to be in a manner where sales reps get it. Once you have their attention, because the dollar speaks, once you have their attention, now you go into details. What are the signals I'm using? Or what are the signals that the machine learning model is using to come up with that recommendation? Why those signals matter? Because again, they'd have every rep or every user have their own hypothesis in terms of what works and what doesn't work. So you're trying to get that trust built with this users. Why these signals matters? And the last step, which is probably the most important one, is what's the action you can take with it. Without that action, it's incomplete. You could have a really nice prediction, really high accuracy, but if you're not able to drive specific actions, it's almost useless. So you need to close that loop. It needs to end. And the other benefit of that action is now you can track. Now you can actually track user behaviors and get that feedback back into your machine learning algorithm or whatever model that is, and improve. And that's super useful. And kind of think about serendipity part. I'll address that again, but I just wanted to plant that seed, why it's important. And we'll talk about that again in the summary slide. All right, so you kind of moved from the initial hypothesis. You delivered a product which works and users are engaging with it. The third step is, again, back to the trust. And I really wanted to make sure trust is really kind of communicated here. That's in any of the data products that I work with, that trust always becomes a key area to look at in a systematic manner. And how does that trust get built? It wouldn't get built overnight, but the transparency is the key. So for example, in the sales intelligence product, we show a number of metrics and data points all over the place. It's not just the recommendations that you saw, but things like, hey, what's the size of my book of business? Or how much quota I have attained? All these data points need to be aligned with the, let's say, timestamps. When things were refreshed, where did this data come from? So more of this transparency that you can bring into data to the user, more trust you would build over a period of time. And this will also give you, again, interesting feedback. If your recommendations are wrong for some reason because the data refresh didn't happen at the right time, the job failed for some reason, now reps are not trusting, they are not doubting your algorithm. Now they are doubting the data refresh timestamp. And now they're telling you that, hey, I know you're giving me these recommendations, but it's because the data didn't get refreshed. And now you have an opportunity to clean it up. So the transparency helps immensely. And the third one is always have your user experience collect feedback. Obviously, as part of the product, you have to track every action that the user takes in the portal, but at the same time, try to make it explicit as well. Maybe in-app surveys. That's a great way to collect feedbacks periodically. So, all right, I guess I talked ahead of the slide, but in a nutshell, so these are some of the ideas I talked about, which is the transparency and so on in actual UI. Personalization happens, kind of helps immensely as well. So if you're giving a very specific recommendation by saying that, hey, Mr. Rep, I understand your book of business. I understand which business you're part of, if you're a multi-line of business organization. Or I understand what your role is. And based on that, I'm giving you a very specific recommendation that's relevant to you. That creates trust. So some of the ideas there, but essentially building that trust is the critical part. And that brings us to what we have been building at LinkedIn in terms of sales intelligence. We call it NBA, Next Best Action. And essentially the goal of that is exactly what I described, which is deliver real-time, personalized, actionable intelligence to move sales opportunities forward. And the goal is for our sales reps our sales force to be most data-driven in the industry and ensure that we are enabling them to sell more things faster. That's our charter. All these ideas have come together. We have been working on them for many quarters now. For one of the business lines, we have rolled this out, and we are getting some very interesting field feedback. So it's a real product at this point. It's a GDPR compliant in the world that we live in. It's a big liability if we don't have that covered. So compliance is a big area of focus as well. And from a tracking perspective, it's a daily active use case. We almost want this to be a rep's go-to place every morning and act on the recommendations that we are providing to them. So that's sort of what we have built. Takeaways. So, and essentially the basic product principles still hold. So just because it's a data product doesn't mean there are some different set of principles that kick in. You still have to make sure you're building the right stuff. This is the strategy part again. You still have to make sure that you're building stuff in the right manner. And this is the usability part. Iterate, right? Measure and iterate. That's always critical. You'll never get it right in the first go around. So from that perspective, make sure every interaction that you care about is tracked. And not just tracked, but then correlated back to the value levers that you're delivering. And that gives you kind of an analytical framework in terms of if I have 15 new features I have to implement, which one really matters? Which one moves the needle? So that analytical framework would be super important as you kind of evolve the product. The second point, again, I think it kind of keeps coming back. We oftentimes get into the sophisticated machine learned algorithms or models for the recommendation system. It's a great end state, but doesn't have to be the first step. And in fact, and this is the journey we went through, our first version was entirely rule-based. And that allowed us to still deliver value, still de-risk the product, still make sure that the first two steps in the journey that we had adequately addressed user pain points and understood their behaviors. And that helped us, when the machine learning models kicked in, we were in a much better position from the feature engineering perspective because we understood what features mattered. So from a version 1.0 perspective, go build rule-based system. It's perfectly okay. It's the quickest way to get out there and collect feedback. And eventually you can evolve into a more sophisticated model. And the last one is, again, trust is the key for data products particularly. Data can do funny things at different times. And if you don't have that trust, any disconnect can break that trust. So focus on that. And I'm ahead, so let me just, and I'm sure, this is something I stumbled upon, and this is kind of highly philosophical, but if you replace life with data products, it's kind of the same thing. You would learn a lot. You'll learn a lot, but looking back. You have to really go through that journey. Fail few times, get your lessons, and hopefully they will make sense to you, and next time around you'll be in a better position to solve the opportunity that you have in front of you. So that's a talk. Happy to answer questions. I'm ahead of time. Wow.
Yeah.
Curious if you did any experimentation to kind of measure the results or the efficacy of your tools.
Yeah, so we sort of break down the whole measurement part into two big buckets. The first one is just the product bucket, where we measure the actual usage. So weekly actives, daily actives, click-through rates on recommendations. We explicitly give thumb up, thumb down, so we measure that. But that is all in-product behavior. And that does not necessarily communicate whether you delivered the value. Did you actually move the equation I was talking about? So that's what we consider the value bucket. And for the value bucket, we work very closely with our sales ops organizations, where they have instrumented ways to measure how opportunities are moved in Salesforce, for example. And there is some A/B testing is kind of for the data sets that we available is not as much data as we would like, but some sort of testing to make sure that this correlates to that. So if we increase CTR by 5%, for example, that translates into X dollars in influence revenue from our product. So we do some of that measurement.
Do you have any issues with bias being fed into the model during retraining, in that the account executives or account managers are seeing high scores, so they're biased towards that potentially being a better deal and putting more effort into it, and then using the data that's based on that to retrain it later?
Is that a bad thing, though?
Potentially. I mean, if it's highlighting the wrong deals and they're trying harder for
Yeah. Good questions. I don't think we have systematically looked at that, but I think that's a good. I mentioned serendipity, and I didn't address that. So this is a great way to address that. So the serendipity is exactly what you're talking about, which is reps expect something, and they have their own mental models as well. And if, from model perspective, if you're always giving them top 5 ranked recommendations, which are exactly aligns with what reps' mental model is, there is no surprise. It's like, duh, yeah, what's new, right? So bringing that novelty factor, bringing that serendipity is important. And from a machine learned model, we look at like hundreds of different features. So sometimes, even though the score is not the top, not the extremely likely, we might want to mix things up and bring something which is not highly likely to close, but still surface those recommendations. Because that novelty sometimes matter, and that has some aha moment associated with, oh, I didn't know this. And if you can somehow elicit that aha moment that I would have missed this opportunity, that's a hook. And those are the serendipity scenarios that we want to highlight as much as we can.
I actually have a question building off of that. Like, how do you promote that serendipity and that aha moment and balance against the need for trust that you discussed in your talk?
By collecting feedback. So again, every recommendation that we give, be it through the novelty side of it or be it very highly deterministic, score-based, we are always asking for thumb up, thumb down. And in fact, for some of the recommendations we give, the rate that we see is like 60 to 70% thumb up. No, it's not thumb up. It's accepts, which means that I like this recommendation. Not necessarily I will act on it, but it looks relevant. And that can be attributed back to whether it was a serendipity one or was it a hardcore score one. And we can go back and balance that.
We have time for a few more questions, if there are any. If not, I have one more question
All right.
also. I was wondering how, as a product manager working on the heavily data-driven product, how do you balance your time and your team's roadmap on things related to like the UI that the salespeople see versus improving the machine learning model and the data behind it versus selling your product to the different lines of business?
Yeah, and as you know, it's a complex ecosystem. So obviously we work with engineering, data science, design, insights, sales insights, and obviously reps are our customers. From product manager perspective, I think it's all prioritization and prioritization within the context of a product life cycle. So in the early phases where new things are getting developed, it's more about de-risking the value of the product itself. So in that phase, we focus a lot more on getting the design right. So a lot of early interactions with the designer, the user studies, user interviews, and making sure whatever we are building is the right stuff. In parallel, and data science teams might look at some of these problem statements and start hypothesizing what might be a good way to address some of the problems we are trying to solve. But at least purely from product manager perspective, I don't worry about that at all in the early phases. Once we have de-risked the product, once it's out there, once version 1.0 is out there, we have solved for engagement, because that's key. We have solved for click-through rates and the quality of the initial recommendations. Then more of a models are optimizations on top of that. And that's how kind of time gets assigned in the different parts of the product lifecycle.